Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 78. I'm excited to share today's guest with you because she's a fellow Aussie, but mostly because she's an artist that I greatly admire. Alissa Duke is an artist who specialises in drawing with watercolour pencils. Her drawings have a sketchy, unfinished look to them, but with areas of fine detail that bring them to life. In our conversation, we speak about Alissa's daily sketching habit, why she loves drawing with watercolour pencils, and how she documents the moments of her life through art. Let's listen. Alissa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
I love to find out about my guest's history, and for you, I'm really interested to know when and how you came to art and whether it was with you from the beginning or if it was something you came back to.
I guess as a child, we were a crafty family, sticking and pasting and cutting. In high school, I wasn't sporty at all, so my best friend and I would draw in sport sessions and on weekends and after school, but it's pretty much drawing from magazines. I didn't draw from real life until way into my 20s, so it was always copying things from magazines. And yeah, it's just sort of escalated through various stages in life. So yes, it's always been in there, but not the way it is today.
And how did it come to be this daily habit that you've got? So you are part of the urban sketching movement. Did it come through that?
No, I was sketching daily before Urban Sketches. I guess one of the triggers, I moved from Brisbane to Sydney, and I started sketching with Liz Steele, who started the Urban Sketches movement in Sydney in 2012. But I sort of met her in 2009, and I was just drawing on loose bits of paper, bits of cardboard, whatever I had in the cupboard. And it all culminated in one sort of, I guess 2009 was a big year for me. 2008, I bought my first Moleskine sketchbook, and I made a decision it sort of triggered me. I wasn't looking for those loose sheets. I had a sketchbook to journal in every day. I did Kate Johnson's watercolour pencil sketching workshop live online with her with live feedback. And I think I consciously started to draw every day as a habit, and I just haven't stopped, basically. It released something within me.
Wow. And how do you choose your subjects? Is it just something that catches your eye each day? How do you know what to sketch in your journal each day?
It's a journal. It's a sketching journal. It's not a personal diary. It used to be, I guess I've got a few hats. I'm a sketcher and a drawer. So I sketch quickly on location, capturing things, but I also draw objects. So I could be involved in a project that I'm drawing over a few days. A lot of it was capturing events that I went to. Like I'd go somewhere and I'd sketch on location. Now it's evolved to on the way to work, when I was working in the city. So pre-COVID, sketching on the tram. So that's not an event in itself. It's just I've got 15 minutes. I know between here and there, if that person doesn't get off, I can sketch them. So it's just grabbing opportunities for me, as well as known projects that I have that I'm working on. So it's balancing the two. So they basically, I had a look, they basically cover a few things. The on location one will be quick sketches. The objects based are either going to be nature objects, so things I've picked up and collected. I've worked on some family history projects and just documenting objects. So whether it's childhood toys or things from my parents' house, all sorts of different things like that. And then food and drink is the other thing that I seem to draw because it's there and it's in front of me and I've got control over it.
And Liz Steele's a big inspiration for folks drawing teacups and tea and coffee and
Yes,
stuff like that,
yes.
isn't she? And I'm wondering if you could explain a little. You mentioned sketching and drawing,
Mhm.
and I wonder if that the distinction is just the time spent. What for you? What's the distinction between sketching and drawing?
And it is a purely personal distinction that I've made for what I do. I can do a sketch and take a very long, I can sit in front of a building
Mm,
or in a park um, and capture something in 5 minutes, but I can also sit there for an hour and
mm,
and I guess drawing's a bit more detail. Um, that's probably what it comes down to, more studied.
mhm,
Um, Not necessarily more observation, but it's probably the level of detail that I capture on the page as opposed to a sketch which looks sketchy. Um, they can both be, I guess, unfinished. I don't,
mhm.
mine aren't something that I guess fading edges is one of
Yes,
the things that I've discovered over the years. You
yes,
don't have to finish a drawing. It doesn't have to have an edge in a box, so to speak.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lovely style. I think that style of faded edges, of having things implied, it brings real life to a sketch, I think.
It took me years and years to figure out that was my style. And
Yeah.
once that clicked in my brain, I was comfortable with what I was doing. I took years after starting the Moleskine A, so 2008, absolutely ages stressing out about format. I'm still could do better with my formatting, but I've got my own style now where I start on the page and where I leave space for lettering and things like that.
Mm, mm,
Um, But once I understood that my style was the unfinished look and fading
mhm.
edges, it just freed my mind completely as to the way I approach things.
Is it that you had this style already and you came to the acceptance of it, or, did you have a different style that evolved into this faded edge style?
I think I was always unfinished, faded edges, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't. I just thought that I wasn't finishing the picture. Um,
Yes,
and I guess because a lot of mine is on location, where do you stop and where do you start?
yes.
What do you capture in a big panoramic scene in front of you? Whether it's nature or urban, it doesn't really matter. It's making that decision, and
Mm-mm.
and mine can be organic. I can start drawing something, and I realise I've got more time, so I'll just keep drawing
Yes,
across the page
yes,
and down. But if I've only got 10 minutes and all I've done is that in 10 minutes, I can be happy with that 10, or I've ended up with an hour. I can just add more
yeah,
detail, take
yeah.
it across 2 pages. Yeah.
I love that, and I think for some people, they wonder, "How does someone develop a style?" And there's a bit of angst often with beginner artists. "How do I find it?" What would you say to those people?
I don't know. Just I guess I was doing what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'd figured out my medium for the moment, but that moment's turned into many years was watercolor pencils and also an ink pen. I
Mhm.
used to think you had to learn to draw before you could paint, and I wanted to
Mm.
do. I knew I loved watercolor paints, and I loved the style of some watercolor painters. And then I realized I actually just love to draw. I don't
Yeah.
want to learn to paint. The pencils have the same color names. But it's a completely different. Um, yeah, I don't have to learn to paint now. I don't have to go on
Yeah.
courses for
You
watercolor
found it.
painting courses. In fact, I'd love to go on some, but they're for watercolor painters. So that as a sketcher,
Yeah.
yes, it's outside of my concepts, and I don't really want to learn. I want to learn more about drawing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that you sketch every day, and I love that you sketch anywhere and everywhere, like on in the
Yeah.
hospital, on a
Yep.
plane, in a queue. I saw that you'd done a sketch queuing for a COVID test. I love that.
Well, some of it's just documenting life. So it is a
Yeah.
journal of sorts. It's not an intensely deep diary. I never write anything personal.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I could if I wanted, but and it's turned into, oh, I'm here. I've got time. I sketch. It's really good for filling in time.
Yeah.
I guess I'm very impatient, which probably would be why watercolors wouldn't suit me as a painter. I'm a very, I don't like waiting, but now I actually enjoy waiting, sort of, because I can sketch. If there's something to anything is sketchable. That's one of my things. I do have my favourites I return to, the food and the cues and the people and power poles and things like that. But basically anything sketchable if you're filling in time.
That's a great motto. I love that.
Yes,
Anything is sketchable.
absolutely.
And so you have a little sketch kit in your bag, is
Yes,
that right?
yes. So
Yep.
my I've got a pencil wrap. So one of the um, I think it's Derwent, that a friend, so it unwraps and you put all your pencils, and it went on forever
Mhm.
and ever and ever. It carries 30 pencils, I think. So a friend of mine, we, she did it, I instructed her, cut it in half, put the second half at the bottom of the first half. So it's actually a
Oh,
short roll. So when you're actually out and about and you unwrap it, it doesn't take over the desk. It doesn't fall off your lap. It's
yes.
this little hold in your hand sort of roll.
Yes. Oh, fantastic.
And I carry my, what else do I carry? A water brush. So that's how I
Mhm.
transfer the colour on the watercolour pencils. A sharpener, because I like to get fine. I like to give the impression of detail when I sketch. So I don't, although it sounds very sketchy on location, it's for the faded edges, but I also like to highlight some detail. So sharp pencil's good. My Lamy Safari Joy ink pen. So
Mhm.
I sometimes just use an ink pen. Sometimes I use an ink pen and add colour. And my Moleskine watercolour sketchbook. So, and which I know there's lots of brands out there, but I just love these, and I know what my pencils do on the page. I know how they react, and got them all lined up on the shelf and numbered because I'm a librarian and that's what I do.
You must have gotten through a bunch, right? If you are sketching every day.
I'm up to 107 since
Wow.
2008. So I write in the front, this is sketchbook number 107 since December 2008. So it's just a good reminder for me of how far I've come. And it's starting to
Yeah.
fill up on the shelves as well.
Oh my goodness. And so you're continuing with the same form, same size and shape that you started with, or have you done some experimenting?
No, because they stopped. As of last year, they stopped producing. Well, I couldn't find a landscape format Moleskine. They're the 13 by 19, so they're not the A4 size. These are. I've got a bag. It's a Hedgren bag, which is like a travel. I don't know, it's strapped across your body, but the
Mhm.
pockets fit perfectly. My sketchbook and my watercolor pencils in two separate pockets. So it's made for me. So these all fit into the 13 by 19 centimetre. The format was landscape up until last year, and then I couldn't find any landscape. And I normally buy
Oh.
about 10 at a time when they're on sale at Book Depository,
Yeah.
because they're not they're not expensive really. For
Mhm.
something I love,
Yeah.
it's not expensive at all.
Yeah.
And now they're only portrait ones, but the format really changes the way you
Yeah.
have to think about page layout. It really,
Yes.
I didn't, because I've been using the same for so long, I didn't really realize the impact of that about not necessarily what you sketch, but how you capture it on the page and maybe what you feature. That was really an eye opener for me. Lots of people
That's
have change their sketchbooks all the time and have lots of different sorts. Yeah.
that's so interesting. Can you tell me a little about that? How you made the switch and what that felt like and what changes you had to make?
I think a lot of my pictures now go across to a lot of them go
Mm-hmm.
across to portrait pages now,
Mm-hmm.
whereas
Mm-hmm.
maybe they would have just been one landscape. Just where the placement of objects on the page, because I think a little now, but I usually just dive in and start drawing and don't. I think subconsciously I must think about where I'm going to put something on the page,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a top right or top left or bottom right, because I'm leaving room to write things. I
Mm.
don't.
Okay.
Um, the drawing's the most important, but I always want to write, even if it's the basics, the time, the date,
Mm-hmm.
or where I'm at, maybe who I'm with, or. But then when I'm traveling or nature sketching, it's all that extra, and it's giving something context, the history of
Mm.
something, why it's here.
Mm.
I could, I could fill pages about from the research I do or looking up when I get home about that particular object. And say I found, I draw magpies a lot. Yes, I love magpies. But I walk through a park, and it's the same families of magpies,
Yeah.
and I'm, magpies in the park. Their song is beautiful, and then I realise I'm posting internationally, but I'm just posting
Mm.
for me. I'm not. My
Yes.
journal's just mine. But then people in the UK, their magpies are different than our magpies. Should I explain
Yes.
that to them on my page? I'm thinking, oh, look, I'm not teaching really. I'll put it in a blog post note. Maybe I'll put a link to a magpie call, which everybody should hear because it's beautiful.
Yes.
But I don't want to go into unless it's for my own curiosity and interest, the
Mm-mm.
whole history of an object and why it's found in this particular place. I'm pretty much what I do on the day, unless I'm doing a project, one of my drawing project, what I do on the day, I've done, and I move on to the next page
Yeah.
because it's the next day and I'm drawing something else.
Yes. Yeah. I like that you maintain that even though you do have an international audience through the blog and through social media, that this is you, your life. You're documenting your journey.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-mm. What is it about sketchbooks as opposed to art on paper? Is it what attracts you to that format? Is it just portability? Is it something else? Is it being a librarian?
I think they're purely personal, and
Yeah.
nobody's. You can draw what you want. There's no right or wrong. Nobody's saying, "Oh, you haven't finished the page." It's not like you're in a
Mm.
class and you all end up with the same.
Mhm.
The aim of a class is you understand this and you all end up with the same picture at the end. I decided very early that I didn't want to go down a fine arts route at all. I don't want
Mhm.
my, if somebody likes one of my drawings and I've got some, for sale as cards or something like that, and they want to frame it, that's fine. But these aren't for framing. They're
Mhm.
they're capturing my moments on the page, and I can look back and I can look from something from years ago, and sometimes it's better than my memory is to look at a page and go, oh yes, I remember that, and I can
Yeah.
take myself back to that exact moment when I was sketching that, who I was with, why I was there, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a magical thing, isn't
it
it?
is.
And having all those sketchbooks documenting all those days, it must be such a thrill to go back,
It is.
pull one out. Do you how do you revisit them? Do you
Um,
sometimes just pull a random book down, or what do you do?
it's usually as a bit of a cross reference if something comes
Mhm.
up and I go, oh, I've been there or I've done that, or I wonder,
Mhm.
because I put everything years ago. It's still there. Flickr was the main photo
Mhm.
sharing group. So I scanned I scan every um, picture I do, every sketch I do, and I put it up on Flickr and I tag it and I put it in albums. So if I want to look at all the coffee cups I've drawn since
Mm.
2004, I can go on to, that's the librarian part of me. I can go onto Flickr, or if I can do a search, and if I've properly tagged them, which I didn't at the beginning, every
Mhm.
possum that I've drawn,
Oh,
every
wow.
magpie, I can, if I've tagged it properly, it'll be there. Um, and I do go back. because of various things like doing this interview, think, oh, I wonder when I started drawing those. And actually, I've been drawing X for a very, I didn't consider myself a nature journaler or a nature sketcher. I sketched nature, but now that I'm involved with the different groups, I consider that one of the hats that I wear as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about urban sketching because
Mhm.
that seems to be a big part of your history and practice. How did you come to urban sketching?
Um, 2004, I moved to Sydney and I didn't know
Mhm.
anybody. And there was something called sketch crawl, which someone in
Mhm.
San Francisco would name a day, and everyone around the world would sketch, and you'd get your little group meet up groups. And the meet-up group for Sydney was me and Liz. So I met Liz Steele, and we've been sketching. And then she set up Urban Sketches, and it was really part of my social life and part of my life in Sydney. And I'm always like, what can I sketch? What can I sketch? Like a
Yeah.
photographer would walk about saying, oh, what's a good angle? It's like I just visualize, and I so much of the urban sketching things that I would talk about are totally transferable to nature
Mhm.
sketching.
Mhm.
It's like what attracts me. If I had 10 minutes, what would I what would I get down on paper? But I got to keep going because I'm going somewhere. But I might not get back here. And yeah, just and building up a skill set and building up a group of friends and people,
Mm.
both in Sydney and then going to some international urban sketches symposiums. So I went to one in Barcelona and one in Manchester, and meeting people who I met since my Flickr days, a very long time
Yeah.
ago. Even some of them are urban nature sketches now.
Wow, and how does it what happens at an international urban
Well,
sketches
I
symposium?
I imagine it's like I don't know if the Wild
The Wild Wonder.
Wonder Week,
Mhm.
which but it's in person. So
Mhm.
you like any symposium, you register, you pay, you sit up because they open registrations at midday, which is 2 a.m. in Australia, and you all sit up and you click the register button and you keep clicking and your
Oh,
screen refreshes, and it was the most stressful
oh,
occasion.
because the places are limited?
Yes, so you find out
Okay.
in advance the different workshops, so there's different strands, and you nominate
Ah,
which ones you'd like to go for. And then when you actually
okay.
arrive, you have, I think it's 3 workshops a day, and then there's always social events in the evening. Um, and yeah, so the workshops run by someone skilled in that particular area. So a lot of them I wouldn't choose because they didn't suit what I did,
Mhm.
my skill set. But it was, yeah, just it's 3 days of intense activity, intense brain, learning something
Yes,
new, whether you go to anything. I imagine it's the same.
yes,
Just taking in lots of new concepts and ideas 3 times a day by 3 different presenters is
yes.
exhausting.
Yes, I can
And being
imagine.
social as well and talking to people. Yeah, so, but so good for, I guess networking. I don't like the word networking, but so good for
Yeah.
meeting people.
Mhm.
And just seeing different people's techniques and actually um, seeing the streets filled, like going to an area and just seeing a whole lot of people sitting in the gutters and lined up against walls,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
sketching. It was just brings joy to your heart. It really did. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something so magical about being in a big group of people who love the same things that you love and do the same things that you do.
There is, you've got an automatic connection. So there's none of that
Yeah.
awkwardness about meeting strangers and what do I
Yeah,
talk to them about. It's like, oh, so what do you
yeah,
sketch? What tools do you use? You've got this
yeah,
15 questions to ask them already, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, but generally
yeah,
people are really excited to, speak with people who speak their language. But then you might see someone who's on an iPad and you go, well, that's different. I'll
yeah.
watch. I'm not really interested in learning, but it's really fascinating that it's, just it's across all medium.
Yeah, the different ways of doing it.
Mm.
And I love that it's called urban sketches because if it was called urban artists, it would be a whole different thing, right? Do you think this like choice of words is very
Yeah,
deliberate?
the choice, it's very delicate and it's still, I think, contested because the word urban,
Okay.
if people says, well, I live in the country,
Mm-mm-mm.
there's nothing around me, I'm on a farm. it's all about drawing on location and sharing that experience. So putting things
Okay.
in context and sharing. So not just drawing your cat. It's the cat in the doorway that's looking through, and behind it is
Mm.
this. So it's the whole um, drawing on location is the main thing, and then sharing it with the rest of the group. And there's a huge group. So then there are probably there's a manifestation and manifested rules to to be posting to the group. But there's so many groups that you can post to. So for my nature, if I nature sketch. Often they're just single objects, but if I'm giving it context, if I'm drawing a background, if I've got the city buildings in, if it's in a park, it's still on location sketching, sharing that with people. So that's an urban sketch.
Yeah. Ah, that's so cool. And I wonder about you having come to know the cities you've been in because you've lived in several cities. Do you feel like this helps you understand and feel close to a city?
Um, I think you get to know whatever you draw, you get to know it really well. So I wasn't
Yeah.
sketching when I was in Brisbane. Unfortunately, it just wasn't like I go back now, and when I revisit, I sketch when I'm there. Um, Sydney, I certainly got to see areas I wouldn't because I was sketching, and you do like I can draw the Opera House over and over again. It has so
Yeah.
many angles. It is. I'll never tire of. I can't say okay, draw in the Opera House, move on. I
Yes.
can go back and draw it over and over again. Same with Melbourne. I live near the city. I'm working from home, but I usually work in the city. So, as all my friends know, my knowledge of Melbourne is very small. It's just like I just know this wall in a city. Um, so when I do go anywhere else, it's a big event. But I know it well, and if you know something well and you revisit it, you see changes over time. So if you walking down the
Yeah.
same street every day and you're like, hey, didn't a building used to be there? Or hey,
Yeah.
that tree's been cut down. So you do notice changes because you are familiar with things. It's not a bad thing to be doing the
Yeah.
same thing. And then visiting other cities as a tourist, of course. Where do you start? Where do you stop? It's a bit of
Yeah.
that's a different experience. But you can be a traveller in your own city. You can be a nature journaler anywhere you want.
I love that. I love the phrasing you use, be a traveler in your own city.
Oh,
It's a mindset, isn't it? It's a way of just opening your eyes to things you wouldn't have
absolutely.
seen.
You could spend a whole day just walking a few hundred meters, sketching
Yeah.
all the way. Oh, here's a tree. Oh, here's this. Oh, look up, look down. And you literally could take a whole day to just travel a small
Yeah.
amount of time, sketching all the way. How do I spend my weekends? Do I want to do this? Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the way you said that. And how did nature drawing and nature journaling become an important part of your practice?
Um, I think when I looked, so I've looked back over my um, all my Flickr information,
Yeah.
and when I started doing, I'm always interested in nature. So as a
Mm.
family, we always used to go camping in national parks, every school holidays. So that possums and kangaroos and things like
Yeah.
that are always fascinating, always picking things up and carrying them home and going to the information centres. But if just for pure curiosity, not from a scientific sort of um, viewpoint. Um,
Mm.
and then when I did Kathy Johnson's course, I did some really good pictures. Like I was really, oh my God. And
We're happy.
feathers and fur, I seem to just get. I just, but the, I just, my gosh, I do this. I can do this.
Mm.
So now feathers and maybe not fur so much, but feathers. Nests are really, really hard. My mother used to live near a water bird habitat, so she would pick up nests off the ground, and that would be my Christmas present, a
I
box of
love
feathers
that.
and nests. So I've got lots of nests of birds. Of Southeast Queensland, basically. I don't know who they
Yeah.
belong to. Nests are really, really hard. Feathers are fun. um, Feathers with lots of fluff of fun.
Yes.
White isn't so great, black isn't so great, but yeah, multicolored. Um, Lots of little. I love lots of. For some reason, finished perfect flowers. I can't get my head around them. I
Yep.
practice and I practice, but nuts and seeds,
Yes.
dead bugs and insects, butterflies found on the ground, um, all that. So I've got this collection that's building up, and they're just fascinating to draw. And the fact that I found them, I don't want to go into
Yes.
a like a curiosity or
Mm-mm.
shop where something's been captured and in resin, or I can buy it in
Mhm.
a set, or I can buy it. I want to have picked it up myself.
Yes.
And my area is pretty clear of snails, but when I went home at Christmas, I got snails off the ground and I got dead bugs. It was cicada shells. Like I just don't
Yes.
have them in my small space in Melbourne. Maybe they're there. I just don't know where to look for them. Yeah.
The cicada shells are one of my favorite subjects too. I love that you can say here on this podcast to this audience, "I love picking up snails," and everybody's gonna be nodding and understanding. Again, it's about finding the people who love what you love
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's not everyone who can get excited about a snail shell, but the people who do,
Oh,
they
snail
really
shells
do.
are absolutely fascinating. Snails are fascinating.
Little nature treasures and curiosities are perfect for sketching on a rainy day, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yes.
And what does nature look like when you step outside? What do you see around you?
I'm very, very fortunate. I'm in inner city Melbourne, but I'm surrounded by 3 parks. So I have
Mm,
Fitzroy Gardens and Treasury Gardens, which have been planted for, I should have looked up the dates. They're historic part of Melbourne, so since the
yes.
1800s. So they've got, I don't quite know the planting history. They've got a huge selection of Australian trees, but then there's some very formal, um, the elm walk, and they've got some oaks. So they've
Mhm.
got some traditional British trees that lose their leaves, but then they've got a whole lot of Moreton Bay figs, a run of Moreton Bay figs as well. So I should not learn the history of my own area, but I've got these 2 parks. They've got ponds there, so I've got my ducks to go and to look at,
Yeah.
and then there's also a park around the MCG, which I'm near, the Melbourne Cricket Ground,
Mhm.
which is like it's got a lot more eucalypts in it, a
Okay.
lot more variety of eucalypts, and it's a different sort of park, basically.
Mhm.
It's meant for
Mhm.
people to walk their dogs and things like that and go
Okay.
running, but it's not quite as manicured. I wouldn't call the others really manicured, but it's got a different feel to it. Yeah,
Mm, mm. Oh, that's lucky to be so close to those beautiful places.
absolutely, yes.
And where else can you find nature in the city? Do you sketch at the zoo? Melbourne's got a beautiful zoo.
It has. I joined as a member a year ago, um, and I've been about 4 times because the zoo,
Mhm.
and I love going there. It's fascinating. I've learnt that since I've got zoo membership, I don't have to spend a whole day there because it's really
Mhm.
exhausting. There's a lot of
It
walking.
is.
You're in
Yep.
the sunshine. So I've started trying to get there. I think I've been 4 times now. And
Mhm.
it's just a matter, it's really hit and miss what animals will be around. So
Will show
you
up.
can't say,
Mhm.
I'm going to draw the lions. I'm going to draw. It's
Yes.
just turning up. And also where the crowds are. I don't want to be where the
Yeah.
crowds are for many, many
Yeah.
reasons. Um, just finding an obscure animal nobody's interested in
Yeah.
and sitting and watching them, or they walk past and they go, oh, they just move on with their kids. There's nothing
Yeah.
fascinating. But, if the animal's sitting there asleep or eating, I can stay there
Yeah.
for as long as my back and will put up with it. Yeah,
Yeah, tell me about that, about the physicality of sketching outside. Do you bring a chair? Do you sit? Do you stand? How do you hold your kit?
I'm very bad. um, I usually have my sketchbook open in my hand, propped
Mm-hmm.
up against my body with one hand underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll have my watercolor pencil kit, my little kit underneath it, so I can just lift it up and I can easily grab. Other times, if I know I'm just using a few colors, I will grab those 4 or 5 colors in my hand and put the kit away because I just know I'm using those.
Yes.
And I usually stand or lean up against a wall or sit
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortably. Um, I don't stretch as often as I should. I don't get up because
Yeah.
I just completely lose time. Um, I don't carry a chair because it's another thing to drop or lose.
Yes.
I really like to keep my hands and arms free for my sketching equipment. I don't want to be lugging things around. So,
Yes. Do you feel comfortable when people approach you and wonder what you're doing?
I do now. And I know it's a big fear or
Mm-hmm.
apprehension of people sketching in public,
Yes.
because you feel like you're opening yourself up to all sorts of things. I guess because I started my sketching in Sydney, um, at around the Opera House, and people really don't care. They're too busy doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll just walk past you. Children probably show the most interest, and
Mm-hmm.
I've learnt to. I've got like a series of answers and questions. They go, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's so good." So, "Oh, do you?" And you throw, "Thank you. Do you draw?" And they love. And then it's if children, they love to
Sweet.
talk about what they draw,
Yeah.
or just have something. Oh, I'm drawing a building. It's really good because they stay still. You know, you just have
Yes.
a nice answer that is pre-prepared. I've never had anybody criticize or say that doesn't look like it. And if
I hope not. Yeah.
people do, people are amazing.
Oh dear.
Um, I just say, well, it's just I'm just trying to capture my moment. Just have
Mm-hmm.
some good, nice thing that you're comfortable saying to them, um,
Yes.
on the spot. And I think that's the main thing. And
Yeah.
try, yeah. Do you live in Melbourne? Would you like to come and sketch with us?
Yeah. 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 I'm sure some good conversations have been
Oh,
started
they're,
that
they're
way.
absolutely brilliant, especially with the children, and
Mm.
in overseas countries where English, maybe
Yes.
one person in the family speaks English and they're doing, but just, yeah, just getting that, it can start wonderful conversations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to know more about the watercolor pencils and the actual process you go through with capturing a piece. Can you talk me through the process of building up your
Okay.
drawing?
So watercolor pencils are like colored pencils, except the pigment is soluble. So you can just draw on the page like you would with the color pencil, but once you add water, it dissolves and you can move it around the page. So I use a water brush, which is basically a hollow tube filled with water. You can get them at any art store. There's lots of different brands of watercolor pencils as well. My favorite, just because
What's your favorite?
I use Faber-Castell. It's just a
Okay.
personal choice. Yeah, with that. So basically, I start. And one thing that I didn't mention when I was talking about what's in my sketchbook is
Mhm.
a pencil, graphite pencil. I don't.
Okay.
I dive in with whatever color the object is. So if I'm drawing
Mm.
a tree, I've got Faber-Castell have 120 colors, which is just beyond what average person needs. I've got four greens out of there. They must have at least 15. I'm just looking at 12 greens.
Okay, so you've got the whole set at
I,
home and you
I
take selection out of it, is
no,
that right?
I had a selection that I'd sort of refined over the years to what suited
Mhm.
me. And then when lockdown began, March 2020, in April, I bought the whole set. I've been given a
Yeah.
gift voucher at an art shop. So
Yes.
I'm gonna
Go
learn
for it.
about what these pencils do, and I tried them
Yeah,
all out,
totally.
and there's some really strange colours in there. Um,
Is there
really strange. A lot of them are very bluey green, so I'd say they're more
Mhm.
European. Like if I was going to England, I might take some of the
Mhm.
different colours that are there. But I've got my four greens that I'm trying to find so I can read out the colours. Um, Earth green is the one I use. That's such an Australian
Okay.
green. I can use it for
Yeah.
eucalyptus. Then there's pine green, which is a little bit got a bit of a brightness to it, and
Mhm.
chrome green oxide, which is a darker green, and I think grass green, which is like a bright green. So, and because I've got those four greens, I know what they do. And I've been
Mhm.
using them for years. I know the colours they make. I know what will happen when I add water because sometimes the colour
Yes.
changes a bit, sometimes a lot, actually. So I'll do the sketch on the page um, and just, I guess, block it in whatever colour,
Mhm.
the green, just so that I know what I'm actually going to fit on the page. And then I'll start building up the areas. I guess I tell people there's no rules really, but the only rule is they're like watercolours. You can't put light on dark. So
Yes, okay.
if you're going to leave a white area, you have to leave it white basically. But you can, and it's if I'm doing more a drawing, more detailed, it's a matter of building up, like putting something, and you can scribble your pencil on the page. The more pigment you put on the page, the more you get to play with. So the deeper the colours. So one colour can be very intense, but it can also be very very light and delicate. So it really depends how much you've got on the page, and then wait for it to dry, and then go over it with and build
So when you say wait for it to dry, so you put the pencil down, then you activate it with water?
activate it
Is
with
that
water,
right?
spread it across whichever
Mhm.
bit of the page is
Mhm.
going to be used. Say if I was doing a nice bushy green tree, traditional, English oak or something like that, there might be, I go, oh, well, some bits are darker than the other, so I might do two different colour greens and
Mhm.
add the water, wait for it to dry. It's the waiting bit. But while you're waiting, you can work on another area. And when it's dry, add more of that colour again. So build up the
Mhm.
intensity. You've spread it around, build up the intensity, um, sharpen that pencil and get those fine details in a specific area just to highlight, some little leaves coming down or um,
Mm-mm.
some 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 sort of variety in the trunk that makes it special. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mm. And what about colour mixing? Can you mix colours layer by layering, or do you just
you
usually
can.
just choose the colour?
Um, you can mix colours. For me, watercolor pencils work really well in the 13 by 19 sketchbook.
Mhm.
They don't
Mhm.
mix or go well. Well, I don't do them over larger areas very well. So
Yep.
an A4 sketchbook wouldn't really work for me for spreading that water, whereas the smaller ones
Yes.
do. Um, if I don't have to mix a color, I won't. To get a shadow, I'm not going to
Yes.
mix French ultramarine and burnt umber. I'm going to use Payne's grey. It's
Yes.
I'm just going to
Yes.
use or black or something like that. The
Yes.
other way of using them is off the tip of the pencil. So you get your water
Mhm.
brush and and one thing is controlling the water brush and figuring out how quickly the water flows. It's getting to know your material, whatever even a biro. But for this, it's getting the water to flow off the brush, um, and then just putting it on the tip of taking paint off the tip of the pencil, and the
Mhm.
two coloured pencils, and sort of trying it on the page and thinking, oh, I need a bit more of that colour. So taking a bit more of that and putting it on the page, because usually it's quite a small area that I'm going to be dealing with this one particular type of colour that I use. So
Yes.
you think, oh, it's a mixture between this green and this green. Well, I'll use both. So you could either put them both on the page and use the water, or take them off the tip. And then it does make the tip of the pencils a bit soggy and round, but you just have to wait for them to dry, sharpen them.
You've really inspired me because I have been doing watercolor for a really long time. I think it was the first thing I came to when I decided, like you, in my teenage years, that I wanted to do art. Watercolor was the first thing that I
Mm.
went to, and I did have a set of watercolor pencils then, but I used it more for adding details on top of
Yeah.
a
You
watercolor
can mix
painting.
it with other media. They don't have to be used on. You don't have to add water at all. You can add it at home. So sometimes I'm on location and I don't add the water there because it's all
Mhm.
happening too quickly.
Mhm,
But yeah,
mhm.
they can be used with the other medium as well with watercolors. But definitely they're special.
You've really inspired me to get out my old watercolor pencils and have a go of just using them as the primary, basis
Yeah.
for a sketch, which I haven't done before, but I'm really excited to try that
Oh.
now after looking at your sketches. So before COVID, you were doing in-person workshops and you were teaching lots of different genres, but including nature sketching with watercolor pencils, and I wonder, about that, if you wanna talk about your experience
So
teaching.
I was running. So I call myself a watercolor pencil artist. I feel comfortable calling myself that because I feel like I do know a lot. And urban
Yeah.
sketcher, that was my other hat.
Yeah.
And I was doing watercolor travel sketching, which it's all about learning about watercolor pencils. And then we go out for a short walk. We start in the local library and we go out for a short walk, and I'd give people 15 minutes, which isn't really a lot of time. But
Mhm.
when you're traveling, sometimes all you've got is 15
Yes.
minutes. It's all of this is sort of transferable to nature sketching. It's
Mhm.
finding, don't spend the first 8 minutes deciding what to draw. Finding something
Yes.
you connect with, pretty much straight away, diving in. Don't do that pencil sketch. No pencils allowed. Dive in with the colour that there is, or a colour. Um,
Yeah.
and then moving on to another place. And yeah, travel sketching was my thing, but I live so close to a park and it seems so ridiculous. So my nature sketching classes were pretty much, now that I've joined the different nature sketching groups, they're
Mhm.
picking up on bits of that. So I'm hearing things and I go, oh, that's what I used to tell people. It's about
Mhm.
stopping and observing and connecting with something, even just for that time that you're drawing it, just looking closely and just those questions that go through your head.
Mm.
It's just slowing down and stimulating your curiosity, something you walk past every day and you suddenly sketch it for X amount of
Yeah.
time. It's fascinating. For that amount of time, you may move on and never do it again, or you
Mhm.
may decide to draw it once a week and become absolutely fascinated with this particular object in nature, or this tree, or this plant, or this bird. So, yeah. So once
Yeah.
we'll start up again someday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, this is this whole new world. But there has been some really great opportunities, including the Melbourne Nature Journal Club, which is run by Amy Kirkbright, which you've
Yes,
been a part of.
I have. I've attended a few of Amy's online sessions. So on Saturday mornings, which has been really great because I'm not doing anything else on Saturday mornings, and I'm feeling quite comfortable in the online environment, which I'm not quite so comfortable in the in-person environment. Um, Turning up, learning, going
Yeah.
out, coming, doing our own thing, coming back and sketching, which has been really lovely, really good, and meeting people. They are from around Australia, but some are in Melbourne, and one day I'll get to meet them. And then yesterday, um, she actually held a sketch walk along the coast, so out at St Kilda, which involved going somewhere and being with people. But it was just,
Beautiful.
being with experts in that area, and then have Amy guide us about um, what to sketch and how to sketch and
Mm.
all the basics, and because I was
Mm.
in a new and different area and not my familiar park that it's mine. I know it so well. I walk through it every
Yes.
day. I was looking at things. Oh, this beach is different. Oh, this is different. I was like, where do I start sketching? So I was breaking one of
Yeah.
my own. What attracts you first? Oh, because it's all so new
Yeah.
and different. So and yes, in Amy's session, I decided to draw the salt bush because we're at the sea, and now I've got these questions about salt bush that I have to look up.
Yes.
Yes.
Isn't it wonderful when you get into this mindset that everything is actually fascinating? It could be the opera house again and again, or it could be a salt bush, or it could be whatever it is when you switch on this
I've
mindset.
drawn garbage bins, and they can be
Yeah.
fascinating. Like
Yeah.
you're at a cafe and you want this beautiful view, but you get this view. Oh, it's interesting. I'll sketch it. It's like
Yeah. I love it. It makes everything valuable. Everything has its own inbuilt value.
it does. Yes, and you that curiosity, that 15 minutes or 40 minutes of curiosity gives value to, you get so much out of it. The tree may not get anything out of it, or the garbage bin, but you get so much out of that time of just ignoring the rest of the world and just focusing.
Yeah.
It's not concentrating, because the word concentrating sort of sounds like it requires some effort, but it doesn't. If you're drawing,
Yeah, concentrating sounds like work, but this is more play, I would
oh,
say.
definitely, yes.
Is there anything that you've been focusing on in your journals that has been inspiring you particularly lately?
It's just a relief to be returning to some sort of normal. So I've been sketching a
Yeah.
lot in the gardens in the past few years, because that has been my neighbourhood. I'm beginning to go out a little bit more. So the whole getting from A to B and sketching, I'm doing more. Otherwise, it's still probably more nature than anything else, nature and food, than anything else recently. I'm in my comfort zone when I'm drawing particular things, and I'm happy to be returning to that comfort zone. Thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your practice and your joys and your techniques. It's been so, so much fun to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It's been so exciting to be involved.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Alissa. I loved learning about her daily sketching habit and how she gets things down on the page and moves on to the next sketch and the next sketch. I'm amazed that she has filled 107 sketchbooks since 2008. It's given me inspiration to get going and quick sketch more and just fill pages. Sometimes I get stuck on the idea that I don't have time to nature journal, but Alissa's really inspired me just to take 10 minutes instead of trying to set aside a bigger chunk of time that may not be easy to find. I'm also really inspired now to dig out those old watercolour pencils and see what they can do. If you're interested to know which colours of pencil Alissa carries with her in her pencil wrap, follow the link in the show notes to her blog where you can find a post about it, along with a sketch of her pencils, of course. I'd like to take a moment to say a big thank you to those people supporting Journaling with Nature podcast on Patreon. Your support really makes this project sustainable in the long term, and I hope you know how much I appreciate this. Every week I get to speak with artists and nature lovers like Alissa and turn these conversations into podcasts. The support from patrons has meant that I can keep up this weekly rhythm, and I'm so glad about that. If you're a listener who enjoys the podcast and would like to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/journalingwithnature and pledge as little as $1 a month to help keep the project going. There are so many more exciting guests coming up, and I can't wait to share them with you. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.